The poker chip hit the table with a finality that made Meredith Jensen's blood run cold as she stood outside the saloon window in Socorro, New Mexico territory, watching her brother throw away what remained of their family's dignity on a September evening in 1878. Thomas had promised this would be the last time. He had looked her straight in the eye that morning and swore on their mother's grave that he would not set foot in another gambling hall. Yet here he was, shoulders hunched over a card table inside the Red Moon Saloon, surrounded by men whose faces showed no mercy. Meredith pressed her palm against the dusty window glass, her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched the dealer spread another hand of cards across the green felt. The oil lamps cast shadows that danced across the walls, making the whole scene look like something from a fever dream. She should have known better than to believe him. Thomas had been chasing the ghost of one big win ever since their father died 3 years ago, leaving them with nothing but a failing ranch and debts that multiplied like rabbits. At 19, Meredith had done everything she could to keep them afloat. She took in washing, mended clothes for the townspeople, even worked at the general store when Mr. Patterson needed extra help. But Thomas was 23 and should have been the one shouldering the burden, yet he seemed determined to dig them deeper into a hole they would never climb out of. The door to the saloon burst open and Thomas stumbled out, his face ashen in the moonlight. Meredith rushed to him, grabbing his arm before he could collapse onto the wooden walkway. "Thomas, what happened? Tell me you did not lose everything again." Her brother could not meet her eyes. His hands were shaking and she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Meredith, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. How much?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. $500. The world tilted sideways. $500 might as well have been 5,000. They did not have $5 between them. To whom? Who holds the debt? Snake Eye Sullivan. Meredith's knees went weak. Sullivan was the most ruthless man in 3 territories, a loan shark who had reportedly killed men for owing him far less. Stories circulated about people who crossed him, about bodies found in the desert with bullet holes between their eyes. "He gave me 3 days to pay," Thomas said, his voice cracking. 3 days, or he said he would take payment another way. What other way? But even as Meredith asked, she felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. Thomas finally looked at her, tears streaming down his face. "He said you would do nicely." The words hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Meredith stepped back, shaking her head. "No." "Thomas, you cannot mean it." "I do not have a choice. He will kill me, Meredith. He will put a bullet in my head and leave me for the vultures. So instead you will sell your own sister." The betrayal cut deeper than any knife could. "I am not property, Thomas. I am not something you can trade away to cover your mistakes. Please, you have to understand, I never meant for it to go this far. The cards they were supposed to turn, I was winning at first, and then everything went wrong so fast." Meredith wanted to scream, to rage at him, but what good would it do? Thomas had already proven time and again that he could not control himself. She had been a fool to think this time would be different. 3 days, she repeated numbly. "Sullivan said if we do not have the money, you are to present yourself at his office above the saloon. He has a buyer already lined up, some rich rancher from Texas looking for a wife." "A wife," Meredith said bitterly. "You mean a slave?" Thomas flinched but did not deny it. They both knew what happened to women who were sold to pay debts. They became property in every sense of the word, with no rights and no hope of escape. Meredith walked away from her brother, her mind racing. 3 days. She had 3 days to either come up with $500 or accept a fate she would not wish on her worst enemy. The night air felt too thin, and she struggled to draw a full breath as she made her way down the main street of Socorro, past the general store and the church with its white steeple pointing accusingly toward heaven. The ranch was 2 miles outside of town, a small spread that had once been her father's pride and joy. Now it was little more than a falling-down house and a barn that leaked when it rained. They had sold off most of the cattle years ago, keeping only a few chickens and one aging horse named Dusty. Meredith walked through the darkness, not bothering to light a lamp when she finally reached home. She sat on the porch steps and watched the stars wheel overhead, each one a tiny point of light in an endless void. Could she run? The thought crossed her mind, but she dismissed it almost immediately. Sullivan had connections everywhere. He would find her, and when he did, the punishment would be far worse than whatever awaited her now. Besides, if she ran, Thomas would bear the consequences. As much as she hated him in this moment, he was still her brother. Their mother's last words had been to look after each other, and Meredith had taken that promise seriously, even when Thomas had not. The next 3 days passed in a haze. Meredith went through the motions of her daily routine, washing clothes and hanging them to dry, feeding the chickens, sweeping the floors. Thomas avoided her, sleeping in the barn and disappearing during the day. She was grateful for his absence. Looking at him only reminded her of what was coming. On the 3rd day, Meredith put on her only good dress, a simple blue cotton that her mother had made before she got sick. She brushed her long brown hair until it shone and pinned it up in a style she had seen in a magazine at the general store. If she was going to face her fate, she would do it with her head held high. The walk to town felt like a funeral march. Each step brought her closer to the end of the life she had known. People stared as she passed, and she knew the story had already spread. In a town as small as Socorro, secrets did not stay secret for long. She saw pity in some faces, contempt in others. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house, actually spat on the ground as Meredith walked by. The stairs to Sullivan's office above the saloon creaked under her feet. She knocked once, and a gravelly voice told her to enter. Snake-Eye Sullivan sat behind a massive oak desk, a cigar clenched between his yellowed teeth. He was a large man, with a belly that strained against his vest and a face that looked like weathered leather. His left eye was milky white, hence the nickname, while his right eye studied her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Miss Jensen, punctual, I like that in a woman." Meredith said nothing. She would not give him the satisfaction of begging. "Your brother's debt stands at $500. I assume you do not have the money." "You know I do not." Sullivan's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. "Then we proceed to the alternative arrangement. I have a buyer interested in acquiring you. He will be here within the hour." "Who is he?" "A rancher named Jackson Morrison. He runs a spread about 50 miles north of here, one of the biggest operations in the territory. He needs a wife, and he is willing to pay handsomely for the right woman. Consider yourself lucky." He could have been a miner or a drunk. Lucky. The word tasted like ash in her mouth. "And if I refuse?" Sullivan's good eye narrowed. "Then your brother pays his debt in blood, and you will find yourself in a far worse situation. I have other buyers, Miss Jensen. Men who would not be so gentle with you. Morrison is offering you a home and a name. That is more than most women in your position could hope for." A knock at the door interrupted whatever response Meredith might have made. Sullivan called out, and the door swung open to reveal a man who filled the doorframe. Jackson Morrison was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and hands that looked like they could break a man in half. He wore dusty riding clothes and a hat that had seen better days. His face was tanned from long hours in the sun, with lines around his eyes that spoke of squinting at distant horizons. He looked to be in his late 20s, with dark hair that curled at the nape of his neck, and a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble. But it was his eyes that caught Meredith's attention. They were a startling shade of blue-green, like the surface of a deep pool, and they held an intelligence and wariness that surprised her. "Morrison," Sullivan said, standing to shake the cowboy's hand. "Right on time. This is Meredith Jensen, the woman we discussed." Jackson Morrison's gaze shifted to Meredith, and she felt as though he was seeing straight through to her soul. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Miss Jensen," he said finally, his voice a low rumble. He did not offer his hand, "Mr. Morrison." Meredith kept her chin up, refusing to be cowed. "You understand the arrangement?" Sullivan asked Morrison. $500 and she is yours, all legal and proper with papers signed and witnessed." Something flickered across Morrison's face, there and gone too quickly for Meredith to identify. "I would like to speak with Miss Jensen alone." Sullivan's eyebrows rose. "That was not part of our agreement. I am making it part of the agreement now." Morrison's tone left no room for argument. "Give us 10 minutes. Sullivan looked like he wanted to protest, but something in Morrison's stance made him reconsider. 10 minutes. I will be downstairs." He left, closing the door behind him with more force than necessary. Meredith and Morrison stood in silence for a moment. The sounds from the saloon below drifted up through the floorboards, piano music and raucous laughter that seemed to come from another world entirely. "Please, sit down," Morrison said, gesturing to one of the chairs near the window. Meredith hesitated, then complied. Morrison did not sit. Instead, he paced to the window and looked out at the street below, his hands clasped behind his back. "Your brother gambled away $500 he did not have, and Sullivan agreed to take you as payment. It was not a question. That is correct. And you agreed to this." "What choice do I have?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "If I refuse, Sullivan will kill Thomas and sell me to someone far worse than you. At least this way my brother lives." Morrison turned from the window, his expression troubled. "Do you love him, your brother?" The question caught her off guard. "I did, once. Now I am not so sure what I feel." "That is honest, at least." Morrison moved closer, pulling a chair around so he could sit facing her. "Miss Jensen, I need you to understand something. I did not come to Socorro looking to buy a woman. Sullivan sent me a telegram saying he had a business proposition that might interest me. When I arrived, he told me about your situation and offered to make the arrangement. He said you would be willing." "Willing," Meredith repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her. "That is one word for it." "I have no interest in owning another human being," Morrison said quietly. "The very idea turns my stomach. But Sullivan made it clear that if I did not take you, he would sell you to someone who would not hesitate to treat you as property. I have seen enough cruelty in this world. I could not walk away knowing what would happen to you." Meredith stared at him, trying to make sense of his words. "Then why are you here?" "Because I am offering you another choice. Come with me to my ranch, not as my property but as my employee. I need someone to help run the household. My previous housekeeper left to get married, and I have been managing on my own for the past 3 months. It is not going well. You would have your own room, a salary, and complete freedom to leave whenever you choose. I will pay Sullivan his $500 to clear your brother's debt, but you will owe me nothing in return." It sounded too good to be true. Men did not just hand over that kind of money out of the goodness of their hearts, especially not in the frontier where life was hard and mercy was scarce. "Why would you do that?" Morrison leaned back in his chair, considering his answer. "My mother raised me to believe that every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. She was a school teacher back in Missouri, and she made sure I understood that circumstances do not define a person's worth. You did not gamble away that money, Miss Jensen. You should not have to pay for your brother's mistakes. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She was. She died 5 years ago, and not a day goes by that I do not miss her." The grief in his voice was genuine, and Meredith felt something inside her soften slightly. "If I agree to this, what would my duties be? Cooking, cleaning, basic household management. I have a foreman who handles the ranch operations, and we employ about a dozen hands depending on the season. You would be responsible for keeping the main house in order and preparing meals. I cannot promise it will be easy work, but I can promise you will be treated fairly." Meredith tried to find the trap in his offer, the hidden cost she would be expected to pay, but his eyes remained steady on hers, without guile or deception that she could detect. "And if I want to leave, you would truly let me go? I would pay you wages every month, save your money, and when you have enough to start fresh somewhere else, I will arrange transportation to wherever you want to go. You have my word," his word, that of a stranger, but what other option did she have? At least Morrison was offering her a chance at something more than slavery. "Very well, I accept your offer." Morrison nodded and stood. "Then we should make this official before Sullivan gets suspicious. We will sign whatever papers he requires, but you and I will know the truth of it." They descended the stairs together to find Sullivan waiting at the bar, nursing a glass of whiskey. He looked up as they approached, his good eye assessing. "Well, do we have a deal?" "We do," Morrison said. "Draw up the papers." Sullivan's smile was predatory. "Excellent. I took the liberty of preparing them already." He pulled a sheaf of documents from inside his coat and spread them on the bar. "Standard transfer of debt papers. Miss Jensen agrees to go with you in exchange for payment of her brother's gambling losses. Sign here and here." Meredith's hand shook slightly as she picked up the pen. She was signing her life away, trusting in the word of a man she had known for less than an hour. But when she glanced at Morrison, he gave her a slight nod of encouragement, and somehow that steadied her enough to scrawl her name on the indicated lines. Morrison signed next, his signature bold and clear. Then he counted out $500 in cash, bills that he drew from a leather pouch at his belt. Sullivan scooped up the money with greedy fingers, counting it twice to make sure it was all there. "Pleasure doing business with you, Morrison. Miss Jensen, I hope you prove worth the investment." Sullivan's leer made Meredith's skin crawl, but she forced herself not to react. Morrison placed a hand lightly on her elbow. "We will be leaving now. Miss Jensen needs to collect her belongings." Of course. She is your problem now." They walked out of the saloon into the late afternoon sunlight. Meredith drew in a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. It was done. For better or worse, her fate was now tied to Jackson Morrison. "I need to go back to the ranch and get my things," she said. "I will come with you." "We can take my horse." Morrison's horse was a magnificent bay stallion, tall and well-muscled. He helped Meredith up into the saddle and then swung up behind her. She was acutely aware of his presence, the warmth of his body against her back and the strength in his arms as he held the reins on either side of her. They rode in silence through the streets of Socorro and out onto the dusty road that led to what had been her home. Thomas was waiting on the porch when they arrived. He stood as they approached, his face a mixture of guilt and relief. "Meredith," he started, but she held up a hand to stop him. "I do not want to hear it, Thomas. Mr. Morrison has paid your debt. I am leaving with him now. The ranch is yours. Do with it what you will." "Where are you going?" "To Mr. Morrison's ranch north of here. I will be working as his housekeeper." Thomas's eyes shifted to Morrison, who had dismounted and was standing a respectful distance away. "You are taking my sister to be your housekeeper." "I am." "She will be paid fair wages and treated with respect. You need not worry about her welfare. And I am just supposed to trust you." Thomas's voice held an edge of desperation. "You have no choice," Meredith said flatly. "You forfeited your right to have a say in my life when you gambled me away to Sullivan. Be grateful Mr. Morrison is a better man than most." She brushed past her brother and into the house. Her belongings did not amount to much. A few changes of clothes, her mother's Bible, a cameo brooch that had belonged to her grandmother, and a daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. She wrapped everything in a threadbare blanket and tied it into a bundle. When she emerged, Thomas was still standing on the porch, looking lost. For a moment, Meredith felt a pang of sympathy for him. He was weak and foolish, but he was still her brother. "Take care of yourself, Thomas. Try to learn from this." "I am sorry," he whispered. "I am so sorry. I know." And she did. Thomas was sorry, but sorry did not change anything. It did not erase the past 3 days of terror, or the fact that he had been willing to trade her life for his own. "Goodbye." Morrison helped her tie her bundle to the back of his saddle, and then they were riding away. Meredith did not look back. There was nothing left for her in that place except painful memories. They rode north as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The landscape was harsh but beautiful, all red rocks and scrub brush, with mountains rising in the distance like ancient guardians. Morrison maintained a steady pace, not pushing the horse too hard, and after a while Meredith began to relax slightly. The rhythm of the horse's gait was soothing, and the cool evening air felt good on her face. "We will need to camp for the night," Morrison said as twilight deepened. "The ranch is still about 40 miles away. We can reach it by tomorrow evening if we start early. Whatever you think is best." They found a spot near a small creek, sheltered by a stand of cottonwood trees. Morrison helped Meredith down from the horse and then set about making camp with practiced efficiency. He unsaddled the bay and rubbed him down before allowing him to drink from the creek. Then he gathered wood and built a small fire, placing stones around it to contain the flames from his saddlebags. He produced coffee, dried beef, and hardtack. It was not much, but Meredith was grateful for it. They sat on opposite sides of the fire, eating in comfortable silence. The night sounds of the desert surrounded them, the chirping of crickets and the distant howl of a coyote. "You should try to get some sleep," Morrison said when they had finished eating. "I will take first watch." "Watch for what?" "Anything that might cause trouble." "Wild animals, mostly, though occasionally you run into bandits or hostile Indians in these parts. I do not expect any problems, but it pays to be cautious." Meredith nodded and wrapped herself in the blanket Morrison had given her. The ground was hard beneath her, but she was too exhausted to care. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about how drastically her life had changed in a single day. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, Morrison was gently shaking her shoulder. "Time to move. I want to make good progress before the sun gets too high." They rode through the morning and into the afternoon, stopping occasionally to rest the horse and stretch their legs. Morrison proved to be a man of few words, but when he did speak, it was with thoughtfulness and intelligence. He told her about his ranch, the Morrison Cattle Company, which he had built up over the past 7 years. He ran about 500 head of cattle, primarily longhorns, and employed a crew of men who knew their business. "The house is nothing fancy," he said. 2 stories, built from lumber I had brought in from Santa Fe. 4 bedrooms upstairs, kitchen and parlor downstairs. There is a separate bunkhouse for the hands and a barn big enough to stable 20 horses. We have a vegetable garden out back, though it needs tending. My foreman's wife used to help with that, but she has her hands full with their new baby. "It sounds like you have built something solid." "I have tried. This land can be unforgiving, but if you are willing to work hard and plan ahead, you can make a good life here. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they crested a rise, and Morrison pointed to a valley below. There, that is home. The Morrison ranch spread out before them, larger and more prosperous looking than Meredith had expected. The house stood at the center, painted white with a covered porch that wrapped around the front and sides. Beyond it, she could see the barn and several outbuildings, corrals holding horses and cattle, and fields of grass that had been irrigated to stay green despite the arid climate. It looked like something from a picture book, solid and permanent in a way that her family's failing ranch had never been. They rode down into the valley, and as they approached the house, several men emerged from the barn. They were dusty and tired-looking, clearly just finished with the day's work, but they straightened when they saw Morrison. "Boss," one of them called out, a stocky man with a thick mustache. "Did not expect you back today." "Plans changed, Charlie. This is Miss Jensen. She will be taking over as housekeeper." "Miss Jensen, this is Charlie Martinez, my foreman." Charlie removed his hat and gave a polite nod. "Welcome, Miss Jensen. Good to have someone who knows what they are doing in the kitchen again. The boss's cooking leaves much to be desired." The other men laughed, and Meredith found herself smiling despite her nervousness. Morrison helped her down from the horse, and she gathered her bundle of belongings. "I will show you to your room," he said. "Charlie, take care of Thunder for me, will you?" "You got it, boss." Meredith followed Morrison up the porch steps and through the front door. The interior of the house was dim and cool, a welcome relief from the heat outside. The parlor was furnished simply but comfortably, with a sofa and several chairs arranged around a stone fireplace. A dining table sat near the kitchen, and stairs led up to the second floor. "Your room is up here," Morrison said, climbing the stairs. He led her down a hallway and opened the third door on the right. "This was my mother's room when she was alive. I think she would be happy knowing someone was putting it to good use again." The room was lovely, with a large window that looked out over the valley, a brass bed frame with a thick mattress, a wardrobe, and a washstand with a porcelain basin and pitcher. Lace curtains hung at the window, and a colorful quilt covered the bed. "It is beautiful," Meredith said softly. "I am glad you like it. My room is at the end of the hall if you need anything. There are 2 other bedrooms, mostly used for storage now. The washroom is the first door on the left. We have a pump that brings water up from the well, so you do not have to go outside for that. Running water. It was a luxury Meredith had never experienced. "Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Call me Jack. Everyone does." "Then you should call me Meredith," he nodded. "Get settled in. Come down whenever you are ready, and I will show you the kitchen." After Jack left, Meredith sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. Just this morning, she had been preparing to face an unknown future as someone's property. Now she was in a comfortable room in a beautiful house, with a man who seemed genuinely interested in treating her fairly. It felt surreal, like she might wake up at any moment to find herself back in her falling-down ranch house with Thomas snoring in the next room. But the bed beneath her was solid and real, and when she looked out the window, she could see the last rays of sunlight painting the mountains gold. This was her new life, for however long it lasted. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her dresses in the wardrobe and placing her mother's Bible on the small table beside the bed. The cameo brooch and the daguerreotype she set on top of the wardrobe where she could see them. Then she washed her face and hands in the basin, changed into a fresh dress, and made her way downstairs. Jack was in the kitchen, attempting to light the cast iron stove. He looked up when she entered, a rueful expression on his face. "I was going to start dinner, but I think you might be better suited to it." Meredith took stock of the kitchen. It was well equipped with a good stove, a dry sink, plenty of pots and pans hanging from hooks on the wall, and a pantry that was reasonably well stocked. "Do you have chickens?" "Half a dozen out back, fresh eggs every morning. And a smokehouse behind the barn. We usually butcher a steer every few months and smoke most of the meat. Then I can work with this. Why do you not go wash up, and I will have something ready in about an hour?" Jack looked relieved. "You are already earning your keep." "Thank you, Meredith." As he left, Meredith tied on an apron she found hanging by the pantry and set to work. Cooking had always been a comfort to her, a way to bring order to chaos. She found flour and lard and set about making biscuits, then located a jar of preserved tomatoes and some dried beans. There was bacon in the cold cellar, and she fried several strips, using the grease to flavor the beans. By the time Jack returned, cleaned up and wearing a fresh shirt, she had a simple but hearty meal laid out on the dining table. "That smells incredible," Jack said, taking his seat. "I have been living on burned bacon and stale bread for weeks." They ate together, and Meredith found herself relaxing in Jack's company. He was easy to talk to, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard. He told her stories about the ranch, about the challenges of managing cattle in the unpredictable frontier climate, about the men who worked for him and their various quirks and personalities. "Charlie has been with me since the beginning," Jack said. "He is the best foreman a man could ask for. Knows cattle inside and out, and the men respect him. His wife Rosa is a wonderful woman. You will meet her tomorrow. They have a little house about a mile from here, closer to the southern pastures. You said they just had a baby, a boy about 3 months old. Their first. Charlie is over the moon about it, brings him by to visit whenever Rosa allows it." After dinner, Meredith insisted on cleaning up. Jack tried to help, but she shooed him away. "You hired me to do this. Let me do my job." He laughed and retreated to the parlor, where she could hear him moving around, probably going through paperwork. She washed the dishes in hot water from the stove and put everything away where it belonged. The kitchen was a good space, and she could already imagine all the meals she might prepare here. When she finished, she found Jack sitting at a desk in the corner of the parlor, a ledger open in front of him. He looked up when she entered. "All done. For tonight, yes." "What time do you want breakfast?" "The men usually start work around dawn, so I am up before that. But you do not need to keep those hours. 7 would be fine for breakfast." "I will be up at 5 to have everything ready by then." Jack frowned. "That is not necessary. I can fend for myself in the mornings. You hired me to cook and clean. I intend to do it properly." Meredith kept her voice firm. She needed this job to work out, needed to prove her worth so Jack would not regret his decision to help her. "Very well. But if it is too much, you tell me." "Agreed." "Agreed." She bid him good night and climbed the stairs to her room. The bed was even more comfortable than it looked, and despite all the turmoil of the past few days, Meredith fell asleep almost immediately. The next weeks fell into a comfortable routine. Meredith rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Jack and any of the hands who wanted to come up to the house. Most of them preferred to cook for themselves in the bunkhouse, but a few took advantage of her cooking, and she did not mind. She spent her days cleaning, doing laundry, tending the vegetable garden, and preparing meals. In the evenings, she and Jack would eat dinner together, and afterward they would sit on the porch and talk as the sun set over the mountains. She learned more about him during those conversations. He had been born in Missouri, the only child of schoolteacher parents. His father had died when Jack was 15, and his mother had struggled to make ends meet. When Jack turned 18, he headed west to seek his fortune, working as a ranch hand and saving every penny. His mother had joined him 5 years later, living with him on the ranch until she died of pneumonia in the winter of 1873. "She loved it here," Jack said one evening, his voice distant with memory. Said the sky was bigger than anything she had ever seen back east. "She helped me build this house, picked out the wood for the floors and the color for the walls. I think she was happier here than she had been in years. You must miss her terribly. Every day, but I try to live in a way that would make her proud." Meredith told him about her own family, about her father's dream of building a prosperous ranch, and how it had all fallen apart after he died. She told him about Thomas's gambling, about the slow descent into poverty and desperation. "You think you will ever forgive him?" Jack asked. "I do not know. Part of me understands that he is sick, that the gambling is like a fever he cannot shake, but another part of me is so angry at him for putting me in that position. He is my brother. He should have protected me, not sold me to cover his debts." Anger is a natural response to betrayal, but holding on to it will only hurt you in the end. Believe me, I know. "What do you have to be angry about?" Jack was quiet for a long moment. "My father died because of me. We were out hunting and I was careless with my rifle. It went off and struck him in the chest. He bled out before we could get him to a doctor." Meredith drew in a sharp breath. "Jack, that was an accident, I know. But for years I carried the guilt of it. I was angry at myself, angry at the world, angry at God for letting it happen. It ate away at me until there was almost nothing left. My mother finally made me see that I had a choice. I could let the anger destroy me, or I could choose to honor my father's memory by living a good life. I chose the latter. You are a better person than I am. I doubt that." Jack turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "You are one of the strongest people I have ever met, Meredith. What you have been through would have broken most people, but here you are, working hard and making the best of a difficult situation. That takes courage." His words settled something inside her, a knot she had not even realized she was carrying. "Thank you for saying that." As September turned to October, Meredith found herself thinking less about the past and more about the present. Life on the ranch was hard work, but it was satisfying in a way she had not expected. She took pride in keeping the house in order, in preparing meals that the men actually enjoyed, in watching the vegetable garden flourish under her care. She met Rosa Martinez, who turned out to be a warm, kind-hearted woman about Meredith's age. They became fast friends, with Rosa teaching Meredith the best ways to preserve food for the winter, and Meredith helping Rosa with the baby when she needed an extra pair of hands. But it was her growing friendship with Jack that surprised her most. He treated her as an equal, valuing her opinions and asking for her input on household decisions. When he went into town for supplies, he brought back things she had mentioned wanting: better flour, a new set of mixing bowls, seeds for next year's garden. Small gestures, but they showed he was paying attention, that he cared about her comfort and happiness. She began to notice other things about him too. The way his face lit up when he talked about the ranch, the gentleness with which he handled the horses, the respect he showed to every person who worked for him regardless of their position. He was quick to laugh and slow to anger, and she never once heard him raise his voice or speak harshly to anyone. One evening in late October, as they sat on the porch watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky, Jack cleared his throat nervously. "I have been thinking about something," he said. "What is that? When I brought you here, I told you that you were free to leave whenever you wanted. I meant that, and I still do, but I am hoping you might consider staying permanently." Meredith's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "I mean that you have become an indispensable part of this ranch. More than that, you have become a friend. I enjoy your company, Meredith. I look forward to our conversations in the evening, to seeing your smile across the breakfast table. The house feels like a home again, and that is because of you." "I enjoy being here," Meredith said carefully. "You have been kinder to me than I had any right to expect. I would like to offer you a partnership." "A partnership?" Jack turned to face her fully. "Not in the business sense, though if you wanted that, I would consider it. I mean a real partnership, a marriage." The word hung in the air between them. Meredith stared at him, too shocked to speak. "I know this is sudden," Jack continued quickly. "And I know the circumstances of how we met were far from ideal. But I have come to care for you a great deal, Meredith. I admire your strength and your kindness. I think we could build a good life together, as partners in every sense of the word. But only if you want that too. If you do not, we will never speak of it again and nothing will change. You will still have your room and your job for as long as you want them." Meredith's mind raced. Marriage to Jack. A few months ago, the thought would have horrified her, but now it filled her with something that felt suspiciously like hope. She had grown to care for Jack too, had found herself watching him when he was not looking, noticing the way his hair curled at his collar and the warmth in his eyes when he smiled at her, but was caring enough. She had seen what happened when people married for convenience rather than love. Her own parents had married for love, and even that had not been easy. "Jack, I do not know what to say." "Say you will think about it. That is all I ask. There is no rush. Take all the time you need." "All right, I will think about it." That night, Meredith lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind churning. Marriage to Jack would mean security, a permanent home, a future. But it would also mean binding herself to someone she had known for less than 2 months. What if he changed once they were married? What if the kindness he showed was just an act? But even as she thought it, she knew it was not true. Jack was genuine in everything he did. She had seen how he treated his workers, had watched him nurse a sick calf back to health with infinite patience, had listened to him talk about his mother with such obvious love. He was a good man, probably the best man she had ever met. The question was not whether Jack was worthy of her trust. The question was whether she was brave enough to take the risk. Over the next few days, Meredith watched Jack closely, looking for any sign that his proposal had been anything other than sincere. But he behaved exactly as he always had, treating her with respect and kindness, never pushing for an answer or acting as though anything had changed between them. Rosa noticed something was different, though. One afternoon when Meredith was helping her hang laundry, Rosa said, "Something is on your mind. Do you want to talk about it?" Meredith hesitated, then decided she could use a friend's perspective. "Jack asked me to marry him." Rosa's face lit up. "That is wonderful." "Oh, Meredith, I am so happy for you." "I have not said yes yet." "Why not? Do you not care for him?" "I do care for him. That is what frightens me. What if I am making a mistake? What if this is all too fast?" Rosa set down the shirt she was hanging and turned to Meredith with a serious expression. "Let me tell you something about Jack Morrison. When Charlie and I first came to work here 5 years ago, I was pregnant and we had nowhere to go. My family had disowned me for marrying Charlie, and we were nearly starving. Jack found us on the road and brought us here. He gave Charlie a job and gave us a house to live in, and he never asked for anything in return. When I lost the baby, he paid for the doctor and sat with us through the night even though he barely knew us. That is the kind of man he is. I know he is a good man, but does he love me? Do I love him? Is that enough to build a marriage on? Love grows, Meredith. It starts as a seed and becomes something stronger with time and care. I can see the way Jack looks at you. He may not have said the words, but the feelings are there. And I see the way you look at him too when you think no one is watching." Meredith felt heat rise to her cheeks. Is it that obvious? To someone who knows what to look for, yes. Rosa smiled gently. You have been through something terrible and you are afraid to trust again. That is understandable, but do not let fear rob you of a chance at happiness. Jack is offering you a life, Meredith. A real life, with someone who will stand beside you through whatever comes. That is more than most people ever find. That evening, as Meredith and Jack sat on the porch after dinner, she made her decision. I have thought about your proposal, she said. Jack set down the coffee cup he had been holding, his full attention on her. And? I would like to say yes, but I need to be honest with you first. I care for you, Jack. I respect you and I enjoy your company, but I am not sure if what I feel is love. I have never been in love before, so I do not know what it is supposed to feel like. I appreciate your honesty, Jack said quietly. I suppose I should be honest too. I care for you deeply, Meredith, but I am not sure if it is love either. What I do know is that I want to spend my life with you. I want to come home every evening and find you here. I want to share my hopes and dreams with you and hear about yours. I want to build something lasting together. If that is not love now, I believe it could grow into love over time. I believe that too. Meredith reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm from hard work. Yes, Jack, I will marry you. The smile that spread across his face was like the sunrise, bright and full of promise. He squeezed her hand gently. You have made me very happy, Meredith. When should we do this? As soon as possible, if you are willing. There is a circuit preacher who comes through Socorro once a month. He is due back in 2 weeks. We could have a simple ceremony here at the ranch, just us and a few witnesses. That sounds perfect. Jack raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was tender and respectful, and it made Meredith's heart flutter in a way she had not expected. Maybe this could work. Maybe they could find happiness together. The next 2 weeks were a flurry of activity. Rosa insisted on making Meredith a proper wedding dress. A simple but elegant design in cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Jack rode to Socorro to arrange for the preacher and to purchase gold wedding bands from the jeweler. The ranch hands pitched in to help prepare for a small celebration after the ceremony, building tables outside and promising to contribute to a feast. Meredith found herself both excited and nervous as the wedding day approached. She had agreed to marry Jack, but the reality of what that meant was only now beginning to sink in. She would be his wife, sharing his home and his life. It was what she wanted, but it was also terrifying. The night before the wedding, she could not sleep. She lay in bed listening to the wind outside her window and thinking about the future. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. Morrison. Would she be a good wife? Would she make Jack happy? Would he make her happy? A soft knock at her door startled her. Meredith, are you awake? It was Jack. She climbed out of bed and opened the door a crack. Is something wrong? I saw your light was still on. I could not sleep either. He looked nervous, his hair mussed as though he had been running his hands through it. Can we talk? Of course. She stepped out into the hallway, closing the door behind her. They sat on the top step of the stairs, shoulders nearly touching in the dim light of the oil lamp Jack had brought with him. I want you to know that I will never force you to do anything you do not want to do, Jack said without preamble. After we are married, you will still have your own room for as long as you want it. I will not expect you to share my bed until you are ready. Our marriage will be whatever we make it, at whatever pace feels right to you. The relief Meredith felt was overwhelming. She had been worrying about this very thing, about what would be expected of her on the wedding night and after. Thank you for saying that. I was nervous about it. I want you to be comfortable, Meredith. I want you to be happy. That is all I have ever wanted. She leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture of trust and affection. I think I am falling in love with you, Jack Morrison. She felt him go still, and then his arm came around her shoulders, pulling her close. I know I am falling in love with you, he said softly. I have been fighting it because I did not want to pressure you, but the truth is that you have become the most important person in my world. They sat there on the stairs for a long time, holding each other in the quiet darkness, and Meredith felt something settle in her heart. This was right. This was where she was supposed to be. The wedding took place on a brilliant November afternoon, with the mountains standing sentinel in the distance, and the sky a perfect, cloudless blue. The preacher was a kind-faced man who spoke about the sanctity of marriage and the importance of partnership. Meredith wore Rosa's beautiful dress and carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Charlie had helped her gather that morning. Jack wore his best suit, his hair neatly combed and his eyes never leaving her face. When the preacher asked if they would take each other as husband and wife, they both said, "I will," without hesitation. Jack slipped the gold band onto Meredith's finger, and she did the same for him. The metal was warm from his pocket, and it gleamed in the sunlight. "You may kiss your bride," the preacher said. Jack cupped Meredith's face gently in his hands and kissed her softly, a promise of all the tomorrows to come. The assembled guests, about 20 people including the ranch hands, Rosa and Charlie and a few neighbors, erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration that followed was joyful and boisterous. There was roasted beef and fresh bread, vegetables from the garden and pies that Rosa had helped Meredith bake the day before. Someone produced a fiddle and another a guitar, and there was dancing on the grass in front of the house. Jack proved to be a surprisingly good dancer, leading Meredith through reels and waltzes with easy confidence. As the sun began to set, and the guests started to drift away, Jack and Meredith stood together on the porch, watching the sky turn from blue to purple to black. The stars came out one by one, diamond bright in the vast darkness. "Happy?" Jack asked, his arm around her waist. "Very happy." And it was true. Meredith felt lighter than she had in years, as though a weight she had been carrying had finally been lifted. She was Mrs. Morrison now, wife of a good man, mistress of a prosperous ranch. It was more than she had ever dared to hope for. True to his word, Jack did not push her that night. He kissed her good night at her bedroom door and retreated to his own room. Meredith lay in bed, still wearing her wedding ring, and smiled at the ceiling. She was married. She had a husband who cared for her, a home that felt safe, and a future that looked brighter than any she had imagined. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Meredith's life. She and Jack fell into a comfortable partnership, working together to manage the household and the ranch. She learned the business side of things, helping Jack with the ledgers and the planning for the next year's operations. He valued her input, often saying that she had a head for numbers that rivaled any accountant. Their relationship deepened in small, meaningful ways. Jack started joining her in the kitchen in the mornings, helping with breakfast and stealing kisses when no one was looking. They took long rides together on Sunday afternoons, exploring the far reaches of the ranch and talking about everything and nothing. At night, they sat together in the parlor, Jack reading aloud from books while Meredith worked on sewing or knitting. It was during one of these quiet evenings in early December that Meredith realized she had fallen completely in love with her husband. He was reading from a collection of poetry, his deep voice giving life to the words, and she looked up from her needlework to find him watching her with such tenderness that it took her breath away. "What is it?" she asked. "I was just thinking how lucky I am," Jack said. "How different my life would have been if I had not gone to Socorro that day. I am the lucky one. You saved me, Jack. We saved each other." He set the book aside and held out his hand. "Come here." Meredith set down her sewing and went to him. He pulled her into his lap and she curled against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," she said. "I should have told you before, but I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That it was too soon. That you would think I was saying it because I felt obligated." Jack tilted her chin up so she was looking at him. "I love you too, Meredith. I have loved you for months. I was just waiting for you to be ready to hear it." He kissed her then, and it was different from all the other kisses they had shared. This one was deeper, full of passion and promise. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Stay with me tonight," Jack said. "Not in your room, but in mine. Be my wife in every way." Meredith knew what he was asking, and she was ready. Yes, that night marked a new chapter in their marriage. They came together with tenderness and patience, learning each other's bodies and hearts. Jack was gentle and attentive, making sure Meredith felt cherished and desired. Afterward, they lay tangled in each other's arms, and Meredith felt a peace she had never known before. Winter settled over the ranch, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. The work slowed during these months, with the cattle moved to lower pastures and the men spending more time on repairs and maintenance than on herding. Jack and Meredith spent long evenings by the fire, planning for the spring and dreaming about the future. "I was thinking we might expand the herd next year," Jack said one night. "Take on another 50 head or so. We have the pasture for it, and the market for beef is only getting better." "That would mean hiring more men." "Probably. Do you think we could manage it?" "We can manage anything together." Meredith smiled at him over the rim of her coffee cup. Christmas came, and they celebrated with the ranch hands and Rosa and Charlie's family. Meredith cooked for days, preparing a feast that would have fed twice as many people. Jack surprised her with gifts: a beautiful shawl he had ordered from Santa Fe, a new set of books, and a gold locket with space for 2 pictures inside. "For our family," he said. "Someday we will fill it with photographs of our children." The mention of children made Meredith's heart skip. They had not spoken explicitly about starting a family, but she had been hoping. "I would like that very much." As 1879 dawned, Meredith discovered she was pregnant. She told Jack on a cold January morning, watching his face carefully for his reaction. For a moment, he was too stunned to speak. Then he let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around until she was laughing and breathless. "We are going to have a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "A baby, Meredith. In late summer, if I am calculating correctly." Jack set her down gently, suddenly concerned. "Are you all right? Should you be resting? Should I get the doctor?" "I am fine," Meredith assured him, touched by his concern. "Pregnancy is not an illness. I will continue doing everything I normally do until I cannot anymore." But Jack fussed over her anyway, insisting she take breaks and not lift anything too heavy. Rosa was equally excited, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes from when her son was born. The ranch hands treated Meredith like she was made of glass, rushing to help with any task she attempted. As winter gave way to spring and spring to summer, Meredith's belly grew. She felt the baby move for the first time in late April, a flutter that brought tears to her eyes. Jack spent hours with his hand on her stomach, feeling their child kick and turn. "Do you hope for a boy or a girl?" Meredith asked him one evening. "I do not care, as long as both of you are healthy." Jack pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Though a daughter with your eyes would be pretty wonderful." The baby came on a sweltering August night, after 12 hours of labor that left Meredith exhausted but triumphant. Rosa served as midwife, with Jack pacing nervously in the hallway outside. When the baby's cries finally filled the air, Jack burst through the door, his face pale with worry. "It is a boy," Meredith said, smiling tiredly. "A beautiful, healthy boy. Jack crossed to the bed and looked down at his son, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I love you so much." They named him Daniel James Morrison, after Jack's father and in honor of new beginnings. Daniel had dark hair like his father and eyes that would eventually turn the same striking blue-green. He was a good baby, sleeping well and nursing eagerly. Life with an infant was exhausting but joyful. Meredith and Jack took turns walking the floor when Daniel was fussy, and they marveled at every little milestone. His first smile, the first time he grabbed Jack's finger, the day he rolled over. The ranch hands were smitten with the baby, taking turns holding him and making ridiculous faces to earn his gummy smiles. As Daniel grew, so did the Morrison ranch. They expanded the herd as planned, and Jack took on 2 more hands to help manage the increased workload. The cattle business was booming, and they were prospering in ways Jack had only dreamed of. When Daniel was 2, Meredith discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and she gave birth to a daughter in the spring of 1882. They named her Rose Emily Morrison, after Jack's mother. Rose was a beautiful baby with honey-colored hair and Meredith's delicate features. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Daniel grew into a curious, energetic boy who followed his father everywhere, asking endless questions about the ranch and the cattle. Rose was quieter, preferring to help her mother in the garden or sit on the porch with her dolls. They had one more child, another son they named Thomas, born in 1884. It was Meredith's way of making peace with her brother, though she had not seen or heard from him since the day she left Socorro. In the summer of 1885, a letter arrived that changed that. It was from a lawyer in Socorro, informing Meredith that Thomas had died of pneumonia. He had left her the family ranch, such as it was, along with a letter that the lawyer had enclosed. Meredith opened the letter with shaking hands, Jack reading over her shoulder. "Dear Meredith," Thomas had written in his familiar scrawl, "if you are reading this, then I am gone. I want you to know that I have not gambled since the day you left. I sold the ranch to pay off some old debts and moved to Albuquerque, where I found work as a clerk. It is not much, but it is honest work, and I have been saving my money. I do not expect you to forgive me for what I did. I will never forgive myself. But I hope you have found happiness. You deserved so much better than the life we had. I am sorry I could not be the brother you needed. All my love, Thomas." Meredith read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. Jack held her as she cried, mourning the brother she had lost long before his death, and the relationship they would never have a chance to repair. "He tried," Jack said softly. "In the end, he tried to make amends. That has to count for something." "I wish I had known," Meredith said. "I wish I could have told him I forgave him. Maybe he knew anyway. Maybe that is why he was able to change his life." They traveled to Socorro for Thomas's funeral, bringing the children with them. It was a small service, attended by only a handful of people. They buried him next to their parents, and Meredith placed wildflowers on all 3 graves. Standing in that cemetery, looking at the headstones of her family, Meredith felt a strange sense of closure. The girl she had been when she arrived in Socorro 7 years ago was gone, replaced by a woman who had found strength she never knew she possessed. She had survived being sold like property and had turned that darkness into something beautiful. She had a husband who loved her, children who brought her joy, and a home that was truly hers. As they rode back to the ranch, Daniel and Rose asleep in the back of the wagon and baby Thomas nursing contentedly, Meredith looked at Jack and felt her heart swell with love. He had saved her in every way a person could be saved, and she had saved him right back. "What are you thinking about?" Jack asked, noticing her gaze, about how lucky we are, about how much I love you." Jack reached over and took her hand. "I love you too, more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone." The years continued to unfold, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, celebrated good years and struggled through bad ones. The children grew strong and healthy, learning the value of hard work and the importance of treating others with respect. Daniel, at 15, was already nearly as tall as his father and showing a natural aptitude for the cattle business. Rose, at 13, had her mother's gift for creating a warm, welcoming home and spent hours experimenting with recipes in the kitchen. Thomas, the youngest at 11, was the dreamer of the family, always with his nose in a book or wandering the ranch looking for interesting rocks and plants. In 1895, when Meredith was 36 and Jack 41, they celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary. Jack had arranged for Rosa to watch the children so he and Meredith could have an evening alone. They rode up to the ridge overlooking the valley, the same spot where Meredith had first seen the ranch all those years ago. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. They sat together on a blanket, Jack's arm around Meredith's shoulders, and looked out over everything they had built together. "You ever regret it?" Jack asked. "Saying yes to me all those years ago?" "Never, not for a single moment." Meredith turned to face him, cupping his face in her hands. "You gave me a life when mine had been taken away. You gave me love when I thought I would never find it. You gave me a family and a home. How could I ever regret that? I feel the same way. You changed everything for me, Meredith. Before you, this ranch was just a business, something to occupy my time and energy. You made it a home. You made me complete." They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, two people who had found each other in the unlikeliest of circumstances and built something lasting and true. The years turned into decades. Daniel married a rancher's daughter from Albuquerque and took over more of the day-to-day operations of the Morrison ranch. Rose married a doctor and moved to Santa Fe, though she visited often with her growing brood of children. Thomas surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, following in his grandmother's footsteps and opening a school in Socorro. Jack and Meredith grew older together, their hair turning silver and their hands becoming gnarled with arthritis, but their love never diminished. They took walks every evening, moving more slowly than they once had, but still finding joy in each other's company. They sat on the porch in rocking chairs, watching their grandchildren play in the yard, and counted their blessings. In the spring of 1910, when Meredith was 51 and Jack 56, they took a trip to Missouri to visit the places where Jack had grown up. They stood in front of the house where he had lived as a boy, now occupied by strangers, and visited his parents' graves in the local cemetery. "Do you think they would have liked me?" Meredith asked, looking down at the weathered headstones. "They would have loved you," Jack said with certainty. "My mother especially. She always said I would know the right woman when I found her, and she was right. I knew from the moment I saw you standing in Sullivan's office that you were special. I thought you were going to be just another man looking to own me, and instead I fell hopelessly in love with you. We fell in love with each other." Meredith leaned against him, grateful for the solid warmth of his presence. "And we have had a beautiful life because of it." They returned to New Mexico and continued their lives, savoring each day as the gift it was. The ranch continued to prosper under Daniel's management, and Jack officially retired, content to serve as an advisor while his son ran the operation. More grandchildren arrived, filling the house with laughter and chaos. Meredith baked cookies and told stories, while Jack taught the older grandchildren to ride and rope. They hosted family gatherings on holidays, the house bursting at the seams with children and grandchildren, all of them testament to the love that had started with a desperate gamble and a cowboy's refusal to treat a woman as property. In the summer of 1918, as World War I raged in Europe and the world seemed to be falling apart, Jack and Meredith celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. The family gathered at the ranch for a massive party, with people coming from as far as California and Texas to help them celebrate. Daniel gave a speech, talking about his parents' marriage and what it had taught him about love and commitment. "My father showed me that being a man means treating others with dignity and respect, no matter the circumstances. And my mother showed me that strength comes in many forms." Together, they built not just a ranch, but a family and a legacy that will endure for generations. "I am proud to be their son." Rose spoke next, tears in her eyes. "Mama and Papa taught me that love is not just a feeling, but a choice you make every single day." They chose each other 40 years ago, and they have kept choosing each other ever since. That is the kind of love I aspire to in my own marriage. Thomas, the youngest, finished with, "They taught me that your circumstances do not define you." Mama could have let bitterness consume her after what happened, but instead she chose hope. Papa could have walked away from a difficult situation, but instead he chose compassion. They chose each other, and that choice changed all our lives. As Meredith listened to her children speak, she looked around at the crowd assembled in their honor. 32 people directly descended from her and Jack, with more on the way. A legacy built on love and respect, on choosing kindness over cruelty and hope over despair. That night, after everyone had gone home or retired to their rooms, Jack and Meredith sat on the porch one more time. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the air was cool and sweet with the scent of the garden flowers. 40 years, Jack said, shaking his head in wonder. Where did the time go? It flew by in the blink of an eye. Meredith reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. But what a beautiful flight it has been. Do you remember that first night when we camped by the creek on the way here? I was terrified. I had no idea what the future held. And now I know that the best decision I ever made was trusting you. Meredith smiled at her husband, seeing past the wrinkles and silver hair to the man who had offered her freedom when she had none. You kept your promise, Jack. You never treated me as property. You treated me as a partner, an equal, and the love of your life. Because that is what you are. That is what you have always been. Jack raised her hand to his lips and kissed it, the same gesture he had made the night she agreed to marry him. I am a better man because of you, Meredith. You are my heart. They sat together in the darkness, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a love that had weathered every storm. The ranch lay quiet around them, generations of their family sleeping under its roof, and the future stretched ahead full of promise. Meredith thought about the girl she had been at 19, watching her brother gamble away her freedom in a dirty saloon. She thought about the terror of being sold, the desperate hope that had flickered when Jack offered her a choice. She thought about all the years since, the laughter and the tears, the children and grandchildren, the life they had built together from nothing more than mutual respect and a willingness to take a chance on each other. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For seeing me. For saving me. For loving me. Thank you for letting me. Jack pulled her close, and they sat together under the stars, wrapped in each other's arms and the warmth of a love that had stood the test of time. The years that followed brought both joy and sorrow, as all lives must. Jack's health began to fail in his late 70s, his heart growing weaker with each passing year. Meredith cared for him tenderly, never leaving his side, and he faced the approaching end with courage and grace. Do not mourn too long, he told her one autumn evening as the leaves turned gold outside their window. "I have had a beautiful life, and that is because of you. When I am gone, I want you to remember the good times and know that I will be waiting for you on the other side." "I am not ready to let you go," Meredith said, tears streaming down her face. "I know, but it is time, my love. I am tired and I am ready to rest. But you still have life to live. Promise me you will keep living, that you will not shut yourself away." "I promise." Jack died peacefully in his sleep on a cold November night in 1925, with Meredith holding his hand. He was 70 years old, and he had lived a full and meaningful life. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, testament to the impact he had made on his community and the lives he had touched. Meredith mourned deeply, but she kept her promise. She continued to live at the ranch, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and she told stories about Jack to anyone who would listen. She wanted them all to remember the man who had refused to treat a woman as property, who had offered freedom instead of chains, and who had built his life on principles of dignity and respect. She lived for another 12 years, long enough to see several great-grandchildren born and to witness the ranch continue to thrive under Daniel's careful stewardship. She spent her final years tending her garden and writing letters to her far-flung family, always signing them with love and blessings. Meredith died in the spring of 1937 at the age of 78. She passed away in her sleep, in the room that had been hers when she first arrived at the ranch all those years ago. Her children buried her next to Jack, under a cottonwood tree they had planted together on their 25th wedding anniversary. The inscription on their shared headstone reads simply, "Jackson and Meredith Morrison, beloved husband and wife, parents and grandparents, they chose love, and that was their legacy, passed down through the generations." The story of a woman who was sold to cover her brother's debt, and a cowboy who refused to claim her as property. The story of two people who found each other in the darkest of circumstances and chose to build something beautiful. The story of love that began with respect and grew into something that would endure long after they were gone, a testament to the power of choosing compassion over cruelty, hope over despair, and love over everything else. Their descendants would tell the story for generations, using it as a reminder of where they came from and the values their family was built on. The Morrison Ranch would continue to operate well into the 21st century, always guided by the principles Jack and Meredith had established. Treat people with dignity, work hard, and choose love whenever possible. It was a simple philosophy, but it had been enough to transform two broken lives into something extraordinary. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not the size of the ranch or the number of cattle or the amount of money in the bank. What mattered was the love they had shared, the family they had created, and the example they had set for all who came after them. In a dusty saloon in Socorro, New Mexico Territory, in the autumn of 1878, a woman's fate had hung in the balance. But a cowboy had stepped forward and offered her a choice, and that choice had changed everything. It had given her a future when she had none, hope when she had none, and love when she had none. And together, they had built a legacy that would endure forever, proof that even in the wildest corners of the frontier, kindness and compassion could triumph over cruelty, and love could bloom in the most unlikely places.